Hello and welcome to the President's Podcast right here on the record with the Ohio Senate. The views the news excludes. I'm John Fortney, the Director of Communication with the Senate Republican Caucus, the Majority Caucus in the Ohio Senate. Great to have on the program Senator Kristina Roegner from the 27th District, your hometown, Hudson, Ohio. Great to have you.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here.
Well, a little bit of activity this past week in the Senate chambers. All the House members were over in the Senate chambers because of ongoing maintenance that was happening in the House chambers for a big veto override vote. The House overrode one of the property tax vetoes that the governor had vetoed as part of the state budget bill. Let me just ask you in general, where do you stand on property tax reform? Is it a worthwhile effort to try to override the 3 or 4 vetoes that the governor had performed on property tax reform?
Yeah, John, absolutely it is. I would say property taxes are the number one issue that we're hearing about. I know I'm hearing about, and my colleagues in the Senate as well. Valuations have driven up these property taxes, and folks just can't afford it anymore. It's like you're paying rent to live in their own home, and it's just unacceptable. So the governor vetoed, I believe, 67 items from our operating budget. The House was prepared to come back and override several of them, and as you mentioned, they overrode one. So I am optimistic that when we come back in the fall as the Senate, we will also override as many of those as we can.
Yeah, the one that was overridden, basically now moving forward, there will be no ability for an emergency levy or for a replacement levy. And I know that affects school districts, but one of the big things is more than 70% of property tax revenue goes to school districts. And collectively, there was a very large carryover of Ohio's 611 districts, cash carryover for those districts in the last year. So it's about trying to, as President McCauley talks about, bringing the property tax system in Ohio back within the anti-inflationary guardrails as it was originally intended under House Bill, I think it was 920 back in the 70s.
That's correct, yeah.
What do you think maybe some of the key aspects of property tax reform that the legislature passed would be regarding local control and the budget commissions and trying to provide an ability county to county for budget commissions to say, oh, maybe we can reduce the burden on taxpayers?
Well, that was one of the provisions that I actually thought the House was going to override this week, but they did not do so. I'm still optimistic they will. But the provision there is that these budget commissions, county by county, as you mentioned, in the version of the budget that we passed, would have the authority to then lower the property taxes, again, providing much needed property relief for the homeowners. The other provisions had to do with also the 20 mil floor and what could be counted as part of that 20 mil floor. Property taxes in and of themselves right now are just so incredibly complicated, complex, and confusing for the average taxpayer. You start talking about inside millage, outside millage, the 20 mil floor, you have replacement levies, renewal levies, emergency levies, substitute levies, and it goes on, and people's eyes will start to cross, and it shouldn't be that complicated. So the Senate and the House, we are attempting to simplify it, increase transparency, and thus, at the end of the day, also reduce the property tax burden. Another provision that the governor vetoed, which I am also hopeful we will be able to come back and override, is there that carryover balance, which you mentioned. So in the state, we have, I think it's $4 billion as a rainy day carryover fund, but if you add up all of the carryover balances from the schools across the state, I heard it was over $10 billion.
It was $10.1 billion.
$10.1 billion. So that is a substantial amount of money that's been collected from the property taxpayers that should be returned to the taxpayers. Now, I understand schools need to be fiscally responsible, and it's good to have a certain level of carryover. But in some cases, it's just simply excessive and needs to be fixed, and that's what we're attempting to do.
Yeah, and more information is better, and you can go to the Department of Education's website, and you can search 5-year forecast, and you can see a forecast over 5 years of what each school system says or believes it will be carrying over during that time. During the summer recess, when members of the legislature, the General Assembly, go back to their districts and work, so that is the number one issue, property taxes when you're out and about, or?
Yes, right now it is 100%. And I'm hearing from my colleagues it's the number one issue that they're hearing about as well. So something absolutely needs to be done.
And you've always been a fiscal conservative. I would say one
Yes.
of the top members of fiscal conservatism in the Ohio General Assembly, if not in the Ohio Senate, certainly. Flat tax. When I've said it before on this program that in 2015, when I first started here, there were 9 state income tax brackets. Now there's 1. How important was the flat tax to you?
That to me was one of the most important issues for me in the budget period. And that's something, you're right, there were over 9 brackets. It was over 7% in terms of the top rate. And slowly but surely, we've been bringing the number of brackets down, and then, of course, the rates down as well. So in this latest operating budget, in 2026, there'll be 1 tax bracket, and that is 2.75% for anything over $26,000, $26,050. So I think it's fair. So those that earn more will still pay more in terms of net dollars, but the percentage is the same across the board. And I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. And we'll also attract people to come to Ohio. States that have a flat income tax or 0% income tax, those are the states that are doing better economically and attracting more people. So it's a wonderful thing that we were able to accomplish that.
And also an important point, and you mentioned it, anybody making $26,000 and less or less, $26,050 and less, pays 0 state
Correct.
income tax.
That's right.
So that's helpful for part-time employees, college students,
It's helpful for everybody.
everybody.
That's working. So, and we want people working.
That's right. And you've been a big proponent of that over the years, too, during your service in the General Assembly. Senate Bill 9 is something that I know you really worked hard on. Talk to us about Senate Bill 9 and about how you really tried to target reducing bureaucracy and red tape in Ohio.
So Senate Bill 9, and you're referring to a Senate Bill 9 from a previous General Assembly,
Yeah.
not this General Assembly.
Right.
So if anyone looks it up, it's going to be a different Senate Bill 9 this GA. But so that was a bill that I sponsored with Senator McCauley at the time. And the goal of that was to reduce regulations in the state, sort of cut through the bureaucracy. And it did 2 things that were, actually 3, that were very important. One is it cut the number of regulations by 30% over 3 years. So it was 10% a year. The second thing it did was create a very tactical and practical and tangible website called Cut Rate Red Tape, where businesses or really anybody could get online, and if you come across a regulation or a rule that doesn't make sense, we want to hear about it, and you can enter it in there, and it'll be addressed by JCAR. And then the third thing that Senate Bill 9 did was until we get to that 30% reduction, for every 1 new regulation that was added, we would take 2 out. So again, to try to get to that goal. And why is that important? It's important because as we had the Mercatus Institute rank all the states in the country, and by the number of words in their administrative code and the musts and you shalls and basically the rules, right? And they rank ordered the states, and Ohio was the 3rd worst at the time. We were only behind New York and California. We were tied with Illinois, and it was not a place we wanted to be if we want to attract businesses and drive our economy. So with Senate Bill 9, that'll take us from 3rd worst and up to the middle of the pack. It doesn't even make us best. Certainly, there's more work to be done, but we thought this was a good first step, and so we're very happy that got passed.
Well, the administrative code and rules and regulations continue to add and add and add until
Yes.
somebody says, whoa, this has been on the books since what, 1970 or 1960, and
Yes.
let's just streamline things and make things much easier. And that also helps business and industry and economic development.
Try the early 1900s. I mean, some of these rules and regulations, it's like, for example, one that I came across was for boilers. And it was a rule that was put in place before the Titanic sailed. And it required any boiler in Ohio that was larger than a certain number of square inches to have a full-time boiler operator, which we don't need in today's day and age because of the safety and the machines are so much better. So businesses were buying boilers that were just smaller than that amount just to get around that rule, right? And they called those boilers Ohio Specials. So it was an example of businesses just absolutely contorting to try to work within that framework that was overly burdensome. So we're very excited, and I believe you're seeing the results of the work that we're doing in the General Assembly, both on taxes, as we talked about before, and regulation as well, creating a stage that's inviting for business. So you're seeing companies like Anduril move here recently, and of course Intel and others, so many others. So it's very exciting to see the results.
And also welcoming the workforce is something that you've done a lot of work on, and recognizing licenses from out of state for professionals. Tell me what that was called and why it was so important. And you've gone through many different levels of professions as well that you recognize a license from out of state.
Right. So this is something that really excites me. You say occupational licensure and people might think it's boring, but it's not. It's very exciting. So, and the way I like to draw an example first and foremost, and that is your driver's license. Imagine for a minute, John, that your driver's license that you got in Ohio was only good in Ohio. And then you wanted to take a trip to Florida, too bad. You would have to get another driver's license in Kentucky and then Tennessee and so on all the way down to Florida. How cumbersome and time consuming. You probably just wouldn't even bother, right? And you would miss out on all the wonderful coasts in Florida. So the same is true for occupational licensure. So if you were a nurse, your occupational license, your nursing license was only good in Ohio. But now what you're seeing is states come together and they're forming these compacts. It's a compact of states. So as soon as a state passes some legislation and the legislation is word for word identical from state to state, then you've formed this compact. And so one for nurses. So any nurse from any of these states that have joined, and right now there's over 42 nurses, just to use them as an example, that license is good in all 42 states. And so people can come to Ohio as needed, they can go down to Kentucky as needed, and back and forth. And it really benefits not only that professional, but also the patients. It increases patient access to care. If there's an emergency, we can mobilize so much quicker. So the first one I did was for nurses, but it went from there. Every other profession saying, we want one. So now that we did one for physical therapists, occupational therapists, counselors, social workers, doctors, and I have one right now for respiratory care therapists, and that they are Senate Bill 149. So it continues, and I think I've done about 13 of these licensure compacts that have been all signed by the governor, and people love them.
Well, sure.
Love them.
Think about that nursing profession. There's so many nurses that also are traveling nurses, right? They're in one state for however long for a contract, short-term contract, then back to another state. That's how they make their living, and so these types of, well, you have to take the test and it's going to be $250 or whatever it is, that's really a barrier to entry, and it hurts not only that person but also the state.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah. Also, didn't you do something similar or have a similar bill regarding armed forces on that?
Yes. Okay. Right. Great question. So all the compact legislation we just mentioned, that's individual specific. So I do have a bill, and that is Senate Bill 218, which came to me from the Department of Defense. And what that does is, on bases, the military bases, they will have childcare, and the U.S. military will basically license and approve these childcare providers, and so they're asking that they be exempt then from having to go through an additional licensure procedure from the state of Ohio. So, and that just seems to make sense to me. You shouldn't have to be licensed twice to do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And from the armed forces and securing, which is in charge of national security, securing the border is something that the Senate recently passed. Senate Bill 172, sponsored by you. Yes. And it basically said that people unlawfully in the country are not privileged or protected from arrest. I mean, one could make a solid argument that border security, national security, and securing our southern border was a big reason why so many people voted for President Trump. Right. And Senate Bill 172 was an important piece of legislation that addressed the so-called sanctuary cities, of which Columbus, Ohio, was one.
Yes. So Senate Bill 172 is not about sanctuary cities per se, but we did have activists like judges in around the state that were starting to say, okay, no, ICE, you can't come onto either the courthouse or the grounds or the parking lot to arrest these illegal immigrants, these criminals. So, this bill says, you know what, if you are here in this country illegally, you are not privileged from arrest anywhere or on any day in the state of Ohio. So you're right, it is something that's important to the citizens of Ohio, to this whole country, quite frankly, to maintain our safety. We have to maintain the integrity of our borders. And you're right, I believe that's why one of the many reasons President Trump was elected.
One of the big things, too, that really got a lot of national headlines for quite a while, and it was a major political fight, part of the culture wars that the left always likes to talk about. But House Bill 68 in the last General Assembly was something that you were a big supporter of. I think you also maybe had companion legislation in the Senate, but it was the Protect Women's Sports Act. And both chambers of the legislature had to override the governor's veto. But just recently, the NCAA put out new rules regarding participation in protecting women's sports. And the number one rule was the following. It says, a student athlete assigned male, or at birth, may not compete for an NCAA women's team. That must be very gratifying and a watershed moment for you, who really fought hard to keep men out of women's locker rooms.
Yes, that's right, John. So a lot of thoughts here. Number one, people aren't assigned a gender at birth. Let's get that straight from the
Right.
ground, right? I know you were just reading it, but I'm sure you agree with me. You are created male or female from the moment of conception. It's going to be dependent upon X and Y chromosomes. So that whole phrase just still it's just wrong. But I love the question. So, and then also, yes, so I was an athlete in college. I have 3 daughters. They were all athletes through high school and through college. So it's important, it's personal, and it truly is an issue of safety. So yes, it was a bill that I introduced a couple GAs ago, but then I was the chair of the General Government Committee when we heard that bill about a year and a half ago. It was House Bill 68, as you mentioned. And wow, that was a really interesting bill. But we had very strong support in the Senate, and so we were able to get it done. Riley Gaines came, so it was great to meet her, and she gave testimony, as did many other people. We listened intently, and at the end of the day, we did the right thing and passed it. And you're right, we did end up overriding the governor on his veto for that, and I'm glad we did, because girls are safer for it today in Ohio. And
do you think, based on the outcome of the November election and President Trump being elected, do you think that there was sort of the majority of the electorate, not only the Electoral College, but also the popular vote for the first time in a long time, that the pendulum swang back to normalcy again?
Yes, it is. Yes. Absolutely, on many issues. I mean, from the immigration issue, but then also on protecting girls in sports, the transgender surgery issue. There was a lot, and then of course with Senate Bill 1, that's another example. So I chair higher ed as well, and so Jerry Serino, a colleague of mine, a wonderful senator, he introduced Senate Bill 1, which will basically do many things, but among them get DEI out of higher education, help these college students focus on learning and not being indoctrinated. There's a lot of good in Senate Bill 1 that was done. So I really believe that will catapult Ohio's education right up to the forefront of our nation.
Yeah, it's already making a difference. We had Senator Serino on the podcast last week, and we were talking about the savings when universities decide to close the DEI offices, and how Ohio State was spending upwards of $15 million a year on that. So the idea of getting back to education and over indoctrination and teaching kids how to think critically and not what to think.
Correct.
And empowering the trustees was a big deal with that as well, where the university exists for the students and the trustees make those decisions. The faculty, the university doesn't exist for the faculty. And and also it's better for the faculty because no more litmus testing. No more where do you stand on some of these radical far left-leaning issues.
We can hire you based on your quality and your abilities and what you bring to the classroom. So yes, we've done a lot of wonderful things in the Senate, and I'm really truly proud to be a part of it.
What about you're very big on being responsible to the taxpayers. We passed a balanced budget in the state of Ohio, required constitutionally, but we talked about reducing bureaucracy and red tape and those kinds of costs. In Ohio, the old political saying is the budget basically spends money on three things. It does more than that, but it's education, it's you educate, medicate, and incarcerate. Medicaid is a big issue right now, not only on the state level, but also on the national level as well. You have a bill or an effort to try to do a deep audit into Medicaid. What would it do, and why is that important right now?
Yeah, so the Medicaid has slowly been consuming more and more of our budget every year. And during my time in the General Assembly, I've had people come into my office and say, look, we can do this program and that'll save Medicaid dollars. But at the end of the day, Medicaid has never gone down. So I was really happy when Representative Mike Davila came to me and said, he had this study that shows that there are over 83,000 people on Medicaid, just in the age, blind, and disabled, that are receiving Medicaid today in Ohio that shouldn't be, because they have more assets than what was legally allowed. And why am I happy about that? Because now we can do something about it. And so I created this bill, Senate Bill 222, but I also was able to get it into the budget. And that provides $5 million for the state auditor to go and audit, specifically focusing on the number of assets that individuals have that are receiving Medicaid today. And but that doesn't stop there. It says, okay, for those that you find that are above the threshold, we need to get them off the rosters, because the Medicaid is there for people that truly need it, right? It should be the basic safety net. It shouldn't be used, it shouldn't be abused by people that aren't qualified.
Well, also people receiving Medicaid benefits that could be working otherwise. Correct.
Yes.
Like able-bodied male adults.
Oh yeah, the whole Group 8 population.
The whole Group 8 population.
Yes.
That's always a big debate in the state of Ohio. But basically it's there for people who need it temporarily, or you have some type of long-term disability as well. And you don't have the assets to pay for it.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was recently introduced, your bill?
Oh, yes. My bill, Senate Bill 222, was, recently introduced, but I don't think we're going to need it because it was also put into the budget. And the budget was passed and signed, and I don't believe the governor vetoed that one. Although he did veto 67 items, but I don't think that one was vetoed.
Okay. And speaking of medical care, you have a bill with Senator Steve Huffman that would provide an additional level, basically, to try something for people who are really suffering from a potentially fatal illness. Tell me more about that.
That's right. So if you have a patient that's, as you mentioned, suffering a fatal illness or something very serious, and they've exhausted all traditional forms of treatments, this bill would allow them, as long as their doctor agrees, to try a new medicine that may not have been approved yet for use in the general population, or a different device or therapy. So this gives them extra options as they're fighting for their life. So it's a wonderful bill. It's still in committee. It has, but I'm very optimistic that it'll be passed hopefully in short order.
I also want to make a special mention and say thank you to Hudson Community Living here in Hudson, Ohio. And as we talk about medical care and providing care in general and what the state budget does, I know you really did a good job in securing almost $280,000 for this facility, which falls under the developmental disability budget and for maintenance and other requirements that they would need around here. Why are these types of programs important?
Well, this facility is particularly special because it was largely done just by gifts from donors. It was right here in the heart of Hudson. There are several families that have children that are developmentally disabled, and the parents wanted to provide a place for them, or as they aged, where they could live out their life here, and so they came together and they built this incredible facility where we are now. And so the funding that I was able to secure in this operating budget is simply for them as they come up to speed to get to their full capacity of residents. I mean, there's a waiting list to get in here already, but they don't want to take everyone in all at once, just for ease of operation. So that was just to help close that gap for them. But this the community rallied around this place. It's a brand new facility, and I'm super proud of my hometown for putting this on.
Well, if not for facilities like this and for funding for programs that do make a critical difference, where would those children be?
That's right. Yeah.
Before I let you go today, you think we'll be able to bring NASA headquarters to Ohio? I mean, when I first heard about that, I went, well, there is the NASA Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, right? And then I think NASA has some type of operation in Western Ohio.
That's right.
Why not? I mean, Ohio, home to the Wright brothers, right?
That's right.
We just did
Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon, and
Wapakoneta and the history. That makes sense.
It really does.
Do you think it'll get done? I mean, where does all that stand? What effort is being made there?
Yeah. So right now, NASA's headquarters are in Washington, D.C., and I know there's certainly, with the Trump administration, there's a push to rightfully, with federalism, to move more of the power back out to the states, and that is, of course, constitutional. And so one of the things I know they're looking at is the NASA headquarters, and we passed a resolution. I sponsored it. It was Resolution 68. Florida, I understand, is also competing for them too, right?
Space Coast. I could see where Alabama would want to do the same thing with the Redstone Arsenal.
Yes.
But really, the history of aviation, it starts in Ohio.
Exactly, which is why we passed Senate Resolution 68 unanimously, and we sent that to all the to the president, the vice president, and our congressional delegation, and so to urge them to send NASA here to Ohio. It would bring many jobs here. Thousands of jobs would come. The cost of living is much less here. It's very easy to get to with our great highways. And as you mentioned, we have a lot of NASA facilities here already, so there'd be great synergies and all of that. So we're optimistic. We've sent the message loud and clear. We want them here.
Aim high.
Because Ohio is a great place to be.
Yeah, aim high. Sky's the limit. We can go far past the sky.
That's right. That's right.
Senator Kristina Roegner from the 27th District, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.